Grand Canyon, nature's masterpiece, the most visited natural wonder on the earth. But the fact is, most folks who come here don't know that much about it. For instance, to get from one side to the other, you have to drive over 200 miles. Most folks don't know that. It snows in the Grand Canyon. Most folks don't know that. And some folks don't even know that there's a river down at the bottom, the mighty Colorado. But there's one thing that just about everybody knows about the Grand Canyon. Everybody knows about the mules. People have been riding mules into the Grand Canyon for almost a century. Dudes and wranglers and long-eared critters, taking a ride that hasn't changed much in all those years.
Saddling mules one morning, a little tune run through my head, kept going around, around and around. This is what it said: all aboard for that bright angel trail. Now the boss man come a-tearing right up to the gate, said I had to cut the bread for the luncheon, and I'm 20 minutes late. All aboard for that bright angel trail. Come on, you good people, and get your tickets out. We're riding for the river when you hear the trail boss shout. All aboard for that bright angel trail.
Folks, this is not a pony ride at Disneyland. This is not a merry-go-round at the fair. This is a tough, hard trip for anybody. We stress two things today. Number one being safety. Number two is having a good time. We don't jeopardize one for the other. 95% of the safety aspect of this trip is a good, tight, compact group. I'd rather make you mad, I'd rather hurt your feelings, I'd rather spoil your vacation than get somebody hurt today. Now, a good, compact group is the key. There is an alternative. We call that a hiker around here, if you get my drift. If you're scared to death, get out of here. Go get your money back. If you can't spank that mule where your daddy spanked you, get out of here. Go get your money back. If you a little apprehensive, you in good company. So's everybody else. Please keep in mind this morning that these mules are going in that canyon because you want to go, not because they want to go. They've been there. Compact group, alternative walk. Have I stressed that enough this morning? On a lighter note this morning, now that I got the hard part out of the way, some of these mules tend to walk the edge. Don't worry about it. Ain't nothing you can do about it. We train them that way so you get a good view down there. That's okay, isn't it? One thing we don't like to see today is somebody riding like this. Don't lean away from the edge. I know that's hard. It's hard not to lean away from the edge. There's nothing but 600 foot of air between you and the ground. But them saddles are not nailed on. If you're leaned over here, the next thing you know, your saddle's leaned over here, and the next thing you know, you're rooting the trail up with your nose. I can't tell you the amount of paperwork involved in that. Sit up straight in your saddle, keep your mule up close to the mule in front of you, pay attention to what your guide says today. We'll try to show you a trip you never forget.
Jody, get up here.
Just about the first thing you see as you head down the Bright Angel Trail is the Kolb Studio. Emery and Ellsworth Kolb were brothers, and they built their place back in 1904 and started taking pictures of mule parties as they started down into the canyon. Now, there wasn't enough pure water on the rim to process the photographs, so Emery had to hightail it down to the springs at Indian Gardens, about 4.5 miles, so he could develop the pictures. Then he'd have to hustle back up to the rim in time to sell the prints to the dudes when they came back out of the canyon. Sometimes he made 3 trips in a single day. Emery Kolb took pictures for more than 70 years and photographed almost 70,000 mule trips. On the Bright Angel Trail, it doesn't take long for your mind to start working overtime. Do mules ever have a bad day? Was that a little slip just now? What if the lady in front of you faints? And why does your mule have to stay so close to the edge? Somewhere above you, a little rock skitters past, and in spite of yourself, you watch it bounce down into the chasm below. Dang, that's a long way down. Now you're beginning to wonder how you can gracefully get out of this whole thing and hike back to the top. Just then, that lady in front of you, the one who's old enough to be your grandma, turns around and says, "Isn't this the most beautiful place you've ever seen?" And of course she's right. And then you remember that in all the years they've been running mule trips in the Grand Canyon, they've never lost a dude.
Is that a little donkey that you're gonna put me on? No, lady, that's a mule from Missouri, and his name is John. All aboard for that Bright Angel Trail. What do you wear those funny shoes for? With the heels way under that way? Is it true what the ranger told us, that you cowboys eat hay? All aboard for that Bright Angel Trail.
Okay, if you look right up in front of us, you'll see some Indian joins on that large rock. They're kind of a reddish color.
These ancient pictographs testify to the long history of the Bright Angel Trail. It lies along the Bright Angel Fault, which creates a natural break in the cliffs and gives relatively easy access to the natural springs of Garden Creek, 3,500 feet below the rim. In the late 1800s, Captain John Hance, the first white settler at the Grand Canyon, began exploring the old Indian Trail for mineral deposits. Other prospectors followed, but it didn't take long for them to figure out that the real money was in tourists, not tailings. Pete Barry and the Cameron brothers, Niles and Ralph, widened the trail and built a tourist camp at Indian Gardens. They turned the Bright Angel Trail into a toll road, and for 23 years they charged $1 a head, man or mule. For a while, there were several commercial mule strings working the Bright Angel Trail, but in 1904, the Fred Harvey Company bought them all out, and they've been running the show ever since. Nobody knows for sure how many folks have taken the canyon ride, but the best guess is at least 600,000. More than 500,000 dudes covering more than 10 million miles, bow-legged, white-knuckled, and hanging on for dear life.
Now tell me, Mr. Cowboy, that's something I want to know. They say that mules don't have children, so where do little mules grow? All aboard for that Bright Angel Trail.
The male jackass is called a jack, the female is called a jenny. In horses, it's called a mare and a stallion, being the female being the mare and the stallion being the male.
Now the mammies was a filly, and the pappies was a jack. They'll take you down that long, long trail, and oh, they'll bring you back.
When you cross for a mule, you cross a jack with a mare gives you a mule. If you cross the stallion with a jenny, you get a henny. The henny and the mule are both hybrids, except that the mule hybrid is more efficient than the henny hybrid, being that the mule has the conformation of the jackass and the disposition of the horse, and the henny has the conformation of the horse and the disposition of the jackass.
All aboard for that ride, Angel Trail.
In horses, you have 64 chromosomes. In jackasses, you have 62. The mule and the henny both come up with 63. That's also part of the reason for the lack of reproduction. All mammals have to have even numbers of chromosomes and even blood counts, respiration, heartbeat. The mules and hennies are uneven. They're unregular. Irregular.
Put the saddle on backwards, said a gal as tall and thin. Can't stand to look where I'm going, but I'd like to see where I've been. All aboard for that ride, Angel Trail.
About midday, the trail can get mighty hot and dusty. You've only been riding for a few hours, but your stomach's starting to rumble, your throat's getting dry, and your tailbone's talking to you, loud and clear. You need a break. Sure enough, the wrangler pulls up the string and it's time for lunch. And right in the middle of all the rocks and cactus, you find yourself in a little piece of paradise called Indian Gardens. For as long as there's been people in the Grand Canyon, they've been coming to Indian Gardens. The reason's simple: water. Miners made their camps here, and the Havasupai Indians raised their crops here. That's how the place got its name. I bet you never thought a box lunch could taste so good. It's been that way for a long, long time, because every mule trip that ever rode the Bright Angel Trail has stopped at Indian Gardens. After lunch, you're feeling better. The trail seemed a little cooler. The terrain is smooth, green, and peaceful. And you're thinking, this ride might not be so bad after all. So naturally then, it's time for the Devil's Corkscrew.
Top of the Devil's Corkscrew.
I think I'm gonna die.
Not on my ride, you ain't. Sit up straight. Look straight forward. Okay, pull her head out. See, that ain't that bad, is it?
Believe it or not, the Devil's Corkscrew is a whole bunch easier than it used to be. Back in the old days, the trail was so steep, you had to get off your mule and walk. When you finally get far enough down into the canyon to get a good look at the river, you're riding on a trail that was chiseled right out of the granite walls. The river trail is an amazing piece of engineering, especially when you realize that most of it had to be built by hand. The work was done in the early 30s by the Civilian Conservation Corps. Though it's only 2 miles long, it took 80 men 2 years to build it. They lived across the river in a tent camp at the mouth of Bright Angel Creek. The work was hard and it was dangerous. Injuries were inevitable. So one of the men, Marvin Gandy, took on the job of training a mule to be a 4-legged ambulance, and he succeeded. It was a good thing because Marvin came down with an appendicitis and became the first man to be evacuated from the camp, carried out by the mule he'd trained. Back in the early days, there was only one way to get from one side of the river to the other: man, woman, or mule. You had to swim. Not surprisingly, there were some objections. Then in 1903, David Rust and some other enterprising businessmen started the Grand Canyon Transportation Company, using mules. What else? They managed to haul the necessary material and equipment to build the Rust Cableway, which was completed in 1907. This contraption was slow and treacherous, but it beat getting wet. Then in 1921, a swinging bridge was constructed which allowed mules and their riders to walk across the river. Finally, in 1928, a rigid suspension bridge was built. The cables for the new bridge, which were 550 feet long and weighed more than 2,300 pounds, couldn't be loaded onto mules. So 42 Havasupai Indians were hired to station themselves at intervals, lift the cables onto their shoulders, and proceed down the trail like a gigantic centipede. But after half a day in the saddle, you're not likely to be thinking about history. You're more likely to be thinking about something long and cool to drink and a softer place to sit, preferably in the shade.
Oh, when my work is over on the ranch out on the plain, all I got to do is sit around. I saddle up my pony, I ride off down the trail to watch the desert sun go down. Cactus plants are blooming, sagebrush everywhere. Granite piles are standing all around. Folks, to me that's heaven, to ride off down the trail when the desert sun goes down.
David Rust, the same fellow who built the cableway across the river, established a hunting camp near the mouth of Bright Angel Creek. Fruit and shade trees were planted, an irrigation system was installed, and simple tent cabins were put up to accommodate early visitors. President Theodore Roosevelt came here in 1913, so naturally they changed the name to Roosevelt Camp. Then when the Grand Canyon National Park was designated in 1919, the Fred Harvey Company expanded the camp and gave it a new name, Phantom Ranch. Back in the 20s and 30s, Phantom Ranch became a very fashionable retreat. Wealthy Eastern businessmen, authors, actors, society ladies, kings, and potentates from around the world came to the ranch to get away from the rigors of life. Modern cabins were built. They even put in a swimming pool, and business boomed.
Folks, to me that's heaven, to ride off down the trail when the desert sun goes down.
down the canyon to watch the sun go down. A picture that no artist there could paint. White-faced cattle a-lowing on the mountainside. I hear a coyote whining for his mate. Cactus plants are blooming, sagebrush everywhere. Granite piles are standing all around. Folks, to me that's heaven, to ride off down the trail when the desert sun goes down.
When you get up in the morning, the idea of spending another day in the saddle may not be all that appealing. You're still aching in places you never felt before and wondering if you can get blisters on the blisters you already got. But it turns out that the trip up the Kaibab Trail is a whole lot easier than the trip down the Bright Angel Trail. You and your mule have sort of got the hang of one another, and you're starting to appreciate this long-eared cantankerous critter. Fact is, in the Grand Canyon, some of the most interesting characters around just happen to be mules.
All the ways of affection are funny, but I guess that there's the old set rule about things that we find in this life to love. I fell in love with my mule. She's high-headed, big and so pretty. She always looks shiny and clean. Like a teacher in school, she bossed all the mules and acted the part of a queen. It was always my luck to be getting mules that had grown short and wide, till I kept on nagging, my boot heels were dragging, till they gave me old Vera to ride. That day the boss said sort of friendly, I know that you'll always be kind to Vera, the queen of the canyon, that trail-going mule of mine.
While it's true that every Grand Canyon mule has its own peculiar personality, it's also true that not much around here would happen without them. Just about everything you find in the canyon that wasn't put there by nature most likely arrived by mule. Strong as an ox, sure-footed as a ballerina, and with the patience of Job. It's the mules who really do the hard work down here.
We use mules in the canyon because mules are much more efficient than a horse. They take to the heat and altitude better than a horse. At the same time, they're 3 times stronger and twice as agile. Because their eyes sit outside their skull like a jackass, the mule can see all 4 feet. So on those rough and narrow trails, he knows exactly where his feet are going. The average mule makes the trip in and out of the canyon 5 or 6 times a week, all year round. In the winter, the trails get a little icy, so we fit them with a special shoe with tungsten carbide chips. That keeps them from slipping on the ice and rock and blacktop and concrete. The shoe, along with the mule's natural sense of self-preservation, makes this the safest year-round trail ride in the world.
whether you call them guides or wranglers or mule skinners or cowboys, the folks who lead the mule trips into the Grand Canyon are a pretty special breed. They know their business from top to bottom and back again. The job's pretty much the same as it's been from the beginning. Equal parts nature guide, camp counselor, social director, and trail boss. They can handle just about anything that comes their way. They know about the canyon, they know about the mules, they know about the dudes, and they know about a million stories.
There was a young man took a bunch in down to Plateau Point, and that was when the burros were still here. And these burros came trotting up to the mules, and one of these mules took off after the burros. And in the process, this old gentleman fell off his mule. Well, his right leg hung in the stirrup. And as things began to progress there, the right leg tore off right at the hip. And this young man that was guiding the mule trip that day, needless to say, got very concerned in a hurry. And he went running back over thinking that he had tore this man's leg off at the hip, and come to find out the man had a wooden leg on. He rolled over and looked him in the face, said, "Ah, don't worry about it." He says, "I've got another one at the house."
I'm hanging around over at the barn one day. This old boy comes up to me. Ron's riding a mule out there. I'm watching him. This old boy comes up to me. He's got this big belt buckle on, says Texas on it. I think, oh boy, what do we got here? He comes up and he says, "Young man, do you work here?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I sure do." He said, "Wonder if you could help me come up with an answer to something I've been wondering about." Says, "Buddy of mine, I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between a Missouri mule and a Tennessee mule." I looked at him and I said, "Well, that sounds like pretty easy to me." I said, "I'd say one's from Tennessee and one's from Missouri." He said, "Oh, bull," said, "you don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Well, okay, how about asking my boss? He's the man riding this mule." So Ron circles around there a couple times. I said, "Ron, this old boy wants to know what the difference between a Tennessee mule and a Missouri mule is." Ron rides around and thinks about it, and he says, "I'd say about 600 miles. This guy just walked off.
It seems this lady was a vegetarian from Southern California. She had a rather difficult time on the trip because, of course, as a vegetarian, as she explained, she couldn't be expected to apply the riding crop and really whack her mule that tended to lag back. So her recommendation was that we assign mules basically according to dietary preference. In other words, we give all the faster mules to those people who are vegetarians and who can't be expected to whack their mules, and we give the slower mules to those carnivorous people who, of course, could. And this brings an incredible image to mind of Ron Clayton and his crew assigning mules in the morning according to dietary preference. You know, "Excuse me, sir, how much red meat do you eat?" "Oh, okay, well, you ride on this mule over here." Or, "Oh, you say you're an ovo-lacto vegetarian. Well, then, here, you take this mule over here." It's something we're going to look into in the future.
One time a few years ago when Gene Waldrop was still the boss here at the Mule Barn, and we were over there loading the dudes out, and Gene could be a little short-tempered with some of the dudes. So he was loading this very plump lady on the mule, and she sat on his hand. And the mule took off, and he was whipping him around there like a kite, and he's going, "Raise up, raise up." And nobody could ever, we were all just standing there laughing, and nobody could stop the mule to help him out.
Raise up?
Yeah.
I got out with my pack strings top of the kaibab. This lady asked me, she says, "How far is it to the lake at Cedar Ridge?" I said, "Ma'am, there is no lake at Cedar Ridge." "Oh, yeah, there is too. Yeah. These people told me." I said, "Ma'am, there's no lake." "Well, there most certainly is." I said, "Ma'am, it's 1.25 miles. Turn the road off. I just be sure to take your bathing suit." You know?
They want to make reservations on the mule train dining car.
So we'll be there in about 20 minutes. You can absolutely get in. Beer, wine, what would you like?
Around here, if anybody asks you, "Who do you work for?" you either say, you say you're Fred Harvey or you're Park Service. That's all there is. So she asked me, like, riding off, she said, "Are you Park Service?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm Fred Harvey." "Is that right?" She said, "Well, God, it's great to meet you." She said, "We really enjoyed your facilities."
I know, I was last week.
Oh, it was great. It was good. Yeah, he's packing on that kayak.
Just met him the other day.
This man really takes a part in his work here.
He holds his age real well.
One time we were at Indian Gardens eating lunch, and I was riding with Pete Peters then, and he's retired now, and Pete was going on and on. "I don't know where these people come from, how they left their brain in the top right-hand drawer in the bureau, how the hell did they ever get here?" And everyone's sitting eating their sandwich, and a guy raised his hand, and he said, "We drove our car."
As you begin the final leg of your climb to the rim, you discover the canyon has saved the best for last. You're already thinking about the memories you'll take home with you. Your aches and blisters don't matter so much now. You realize that time doesn't mean much in this place, and words, they mean even less. Devil's Corkscrew, Jacob's Ladder, the Red and Whites, Skeleton Point, and finally it's the Chimney, the last switchback. The end of the trail. The adventure's over, and your body's probably mighty grateful. But there just may be a part of you that wouldn't mind staying just a little while longer. You ease out of the saddle and you say adios to your guide and to Jolene or Jasper or Miss Piggy. And you discover you got a little hitch in your get-along. It's worth it, though. Like the man said when you mounted up, you had a trip you'll never forget.
Then we all heard the 5 o'clock whistle. It sounded so sad and forlorn. A lady said, "Guide, is that the riverboat ride?" I said, "That is Gabriel's horn." That started the butts into laughing, though the shivers they couldn't restrain. With soggy straw hats and sore where they sat, still they were glad that they came. Now that's about all of this story. She learned to pack dudes to a T. When she grows old, I hope that she's sold to no one but my boss and me. Somewhere there's a big grassy pasture with water and shade all the time. For Vera, the queen of the canyon, that trail-going mule of mine.